Welcome back, ladies. Today I am sitting across from Liz Albanis, and she is a senior yoga teacher and a yoga therapist from Australia. She is the host of the Yoga for Trauma, the Inner Fire of Yoga podcast. And I connected with Liz in a unique way. I get several people that reach out to me and want to be on my podcast. And I have to be really thoughtful about who I bring on because I'm really wanting to curate a certain kind of energy, a certain stream of consciousness here. And as soon as I read the pitch for Liz, I was like, oh my gosh, instant yes, let's absolutely get you on. I think you and I will have a great conversation. And so I'm excited to see where our talk together goes today and what our listeners are going to get from our time together. Thank you for being here.
Hi, Keri. Thanks for having me. I'm really looking forward to this and thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. So, Liz, to start our conversation, I want to know what is something that is just so nourishing in your life right now? And it could be something physical or mental or emotional or spiritual or relational or just like, ooh, like any area of your life that just really feels so good for you.
Oh, that's a hard question. There's so many things. My yoga practice is my anchor, my ground, and it fills my cup rather than emptying my cup.
Yeah.
And that doesn't have to involve rolling out a mat or going to a class even. So that can be pranayama, it can be meditation, it can be self-study, and the normal sort of stereotypical yoga that we think of
Yeah.
in the West. Yeah.
Are there any particular parts of your yoga practice that you find yourself feeling really fulfilled by or just kind of craving right now?
I love yoga nidra at night. And there's also a coherent meditation with coherent breathing to slow down my respiration rate.
Mm,
And I love bee breath if I'm feeling a bit frazzled, or my daughter is with my 6-year-old. Chanting can be nice with or without poses as well.
yeah.
Yeah, that's what comes to mind with my yoga practice. It's
Uh-huh.
evolved a lot over the last 15 years. Yeah.
Isn't that amazing to kind of reflect on how your yoga practice changes with you? But also, I find, and I'm curious if you've found this as well, that like early on in my years of yoga, I needed a lot of very physical yoga to help my body get over chronic pain, to find like balance and alignment, and for things to kind of shift in terms of like the structure of my body. And then over time, the physical practice is still very much there and a part of my daily life. But so much of my yoga now encompasses other arenas because my physical body is in a really good spot. Has that been like at all part of your journey, or has it been totally different?
It's been different, yeah, but it has changed in that when I started practicing yoga, I relied on going to classes, and I was in the Bikram bubble and also the hot power vinyasa. So it was very intense.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Really intense.
my body needed it in the way of my hips. I got a lot of hip pain, which I think is trauma related with the psoas being tight.
Mm-hmm.
And I noticed that certain times of the month I had hip pain, and also when I was riding my horses, which I used to have. And so the yoga did help with hip pain and back pain initially. But then as I've gotten older and after surviving my second fire, because of the way the body holds trauma, I've still relying on that physicality with yin yoga,
Mm-hmm.
hot yoga still at home, and myofascial release with yin yoga, myo yin, or just myofascial release somatically.
Yeah.
But it's not the intense, especially not the vinyasa I used to do because my body is different, especially with arthritis in my foot.
Yeah.
So it's changed in that regard.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a bit different to you. Mm.
Well, and I want to make sure that I'm painting the right picture for our listeners that I still very much use physical practice as therapeutic tools to help my body stay strong and easeful, right? But that reliance on it so much has kind of like the need to spend so much of the time on the physical practice has shifted, if that makes sense. So,
Yeah, that's
right.
that's true for me too because I used to go to a class and it was 90 minutes long or 60 or 75 and I don't think my physical practice would last that long anymore because I know how to meet my body where it is and know what it needs.
Hmm.
And that's the beauty of having a self practice and the knowledge because you don't have to do what everyone in the class is doing. You do what your body needs, and each day can be different depending on our
Yeah.
mood, hormones, whatever. Yeah, so it changes a lot. The weather can change things. So, yeah.
Hmm.
So,
Absolutely.
mm, yeah,
I love the sense of self-agency that comes from that because I tell my students and clients all the time the sign of an advanced yoga practice is not like handstand or birds of paradise. It's can you honor your body and can you meet it where it is today and can you let your practice be modified or adjusted so that it's therapeutically aligned for what your needs are rather than this like aesthetic idea of what an advanced pose is because I will tell you that I have not devoted my life to achieving the most like photographic yoga poses at all.
right.
There are many yoga poses that I will never achieve, frankly, because I don't give a shit about achieving them. But that's not right here from the start. I want our listeners to know that I and that you and women like us are giving ourselves permission to just let go of that and to find a way of practicing that meets our unique needs.
Exactly. Yeah, but that's the stereotypical thing we think of. We equate yoga in the West to gymnastics or a dance routine. A lot of vinyasa flow classes are so complicated. The teacher spends a lot of time trying to memorize the dance vinyasa sequence, and we lose the mindfulness and the ahimsa of permission to practice non-violent self-care to ourselves. And
Mm.
I do like to remind students that the most advanced yogi in the room isn't necessarily the one standing on the head. It's the one who's the most mindful and present and who listens to their body and gives themselves permission to not worry about what someone next door is doing. Doesn't matter. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's your practice.
So I'm thinking of the woman who might be taking a big exhale right now because maybe you've been feeling insecure. This woman, if you're like, oh my gosh, they're talking to me, we're talking to you. If you've ever felt insecure in a yoga practice and felt like maybe somebody else's balance pose was more statuesque or graceful, for example, and you were like the octopus on roller skates, like all over the place, that that comparison just is so silly if we really boil it all down because the true strength of a yogi or yogini is actually that capacity to be present and to keep returning to ourselves and to honor ourselves as we practice.
Yeah, and I would also like to say to that listener that if you feel that way, that's normal. Most people feel that way when they start a yoga practice because of the way yoga's portrayed.
Mm.
And it's to me, the word, as you know, being a yoga therapist, that we know that word, it comes from to yoke, it's the word union. And I like to remind my students that yoga isn't something you do, it's a state of being we try to get into with our practice.
Yeah.
And the ancient yogis didn't do handstands. They're a modern yoga pose. They didn't do sun salutations.
Hmm.
It's good for people to know that and But if you feel that way in the beginning, most of us did, I think, unless we were one of those gymnasts at the start that never did, that, you know, were the most
Famous.
flexible in the class to start off with.
Yes, which just addresses that like common thing that people feel like you might feel insecure about your flexibility level or your balance capacity. Or like I've even had women feel insecure about whether they might have like a queef or a fart, or they might have like a
Oh,
coughing fit, or, and like women, if you're postpartum, like those things are, you might have a queef in the middle of a yoga practice. Like it's totally normal and natural for your body to be a body in a yoga practice. And so just know that as space holders for that, is if you're not a yoga teacher, then you probably don't know that the yoga teacher is expecting people to just be human beings together, and for it to be messy in that wonderful way that it is when human beings come together and take different shapes and do different breath work and experience different things. And so a lot of that insecurity, I think that people who are newer to yoga or who don't have the kind of relationship with a teacher or a yoga therapist where they understand those things, that maybe those listeners can hear us saying that you just get to come as you are, and that you don't have to look a certain way or be a certain size or have a certain whatever.
wear designer active wear. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, you
Um,
don't need $80 yoga pants to come into class. Mm.
exactly. Yeah.
So I know that during our conversation today, we're going to get into some trauma informed yoga topics and some trauma related topics and some yoga therapy topics. And I'd love to start off by just kind of defining some of those words so that our listeners have a little bit of a frame of reference and we're bringing them into our hive mind here so that they can understand it along with us without any guesswork. So first off, Liz, how do you think of trauma, and how would you define trauma as a lived experience for people?
Yeah, yeah, that's a great question. For me, I think Peter Levine described it as stored stresses in the body, but it's often seen as someone who's survived a war, like this big event, but it's there's various types of trauma, like vicarious trauma of knowing someone who survived something, and there's alternative childhood experiences, which is a bunch of things, which was the case for me, that they exceed our own resilience and store stresses in the body that then affect the brain. They can change the brain quite a bit. But I think all of us have trauma, but not all of us get a diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder or complex PTSD. But even if we don't get a diagnosis, it doesn't mean it hasn't affected us. But because there's such strict criteria with PTSD, I don't know the criteria off by hand, but it's pretty strict and it takes 6 months to diagnose. Yeah, so I think we've all got it, but it's just how much it affects us
Mm-hmm.
as well. And I think some of us don't know that it's affected us. And if someone gets triggered, pardon me, I may have a sip of water in a sec, but if someone gets triggered and if anyone in the audience is hearing this and you didn't know something would trigger you, like have a nervous system reaction, as my understanding of a trigger, know that that's normal too. I've had stuff trigger me that I never thought that would. And
Yeah.
what triggers one person might not trigger another as well.
Even within like the same family, like siblings could be triggered by different things, or one experience might be really traumatic for one sibling and not for another. So I really love the working definition of trauma, that it's really anything that's too much or too big or too fast, or we lack the development and support to actually digest and work through and process in the moment. And so, really,
Yes.
anything could be traumatic. And I also really want our listeners to hear that there's big T trauma and there's little T trauma.
Yes, that's true.
And so, big T trauma could be things like a war or a fire or like a miscarriage or like some
Childhood
major
sexual abuse.
childhood sexual abuse, like any number, even like parents divorce, like anything can be, any of those things can be big T trauma. And a lot of times people know with big T trauma that something major happened that they then have reactions to that come up.
Mm,
And then little
yeah.
T trauma is so much more innocuous in a way. Like a lot of times people don't really understand that these smaller things that happen were actually, they made this sort of trauma imprint because they were, for whatever reason, too much, too big, too fast, or you didn't have the development and the support to actually like digest and work through at the time. And so little T trauma can be smaller things like, for
People pleasing.
people pleasing. Yes.
Yep.
There's some other ways that you might see little T trauma.
Maybe having a slightly narcissistic parent, getting,
Slightly. Yeah.
yeah, or a little bit of bullying.
Mm,
Um, yeah, that's a good question. People pleasing's the first thing that comes up, but
yeah.
I'd like to hear your opinion on that too, with little T trauma.
Yeah. So I know, speaking as a woman who's grown up in the United States, that like body shaming is a really common thing that most women
Mm.
experience in their life. And it could be from like, I have a little T trauma from third grade of being body shamed for my weight.
Oh,
And it was one of those things that just like, oof, it like really stung and it formed a body and a nervous system and a mind connection for me. But I know some women experience that in romantic partnership. They might like body shaming, I think is a big
yes.
area of little T
Yeah, that's
trauma.
happened to me. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
But I think it can also be like if you came from a lower income family and maybe you didn't have the right shoes. What, like, I'm doing
Mm.
air quotes for our audio people, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Or seeing that your family didn't have the same financial means or that had a lot of means and other people didn't. Like these are all different things that can make these little indentations in us, or being broken up with by somebody like right out of the blue. You didn't expect it. All these different things that are just so relatable and real. And we've
Mm.
all been through so many of them. These can be the little T traumas that make an impact.
Yeah. To be honest, the little T trauma term was only something I'd heard about last year.
Mm,
Um, yeah, so I had someone say it on my podcast and I started thinking, and then I heard about someone having repercussions from people pleasing as a child show up in middle age. So, yeah.
for
Mm.
sure. They form
But
these imprints on the psyche and on the nervous system that then we kind of carry as these adaptive responses. And then I also want to discern for people what complex trauma is, because complex trauma is a little bit different than other kinds of trauma. So, do you have a working idea of that you want to speak to? We can chat about it
it
together, of course.
Yeah, no, I will chat about it a bit. I know there's therapists and people who don't believe it's different because it's not in the DSM-5, the diagnostic methodology. But to me, it is what it is. It's more complex than PTSD. It might be someone like me who's had multiple big T trauma experiences,
Mm-hmm.
like two fires, sexual abuse, stuff like that.
Yeah.
But also, I've heard that ADHD, people like me, who's I've got ADHD, are more prone to developing complex PTSD. So
Mm-hmm.
that's my way of describing it, and I'm sure you'd have some more
Yeah.
wisdom.
Well, and it could be like our medical systems may look at it differently because I'm in the United States medical system and you're in the Australian one. So
True.
in the States, PTSD is more of a degree of severity of trauma and like a clinical diagnosis of a person is qualifying with these particular things and it's PTSD. And then complex trauma is more about naming the repetition of experience. So, did something happen repeatedly, or was something more of like a singular event that didn't
Yeah.
happen again? And so it has to do with like the idea of complex trauma has more to do with like frequency and repetition. And PTSD is more of like a medical condition of qualifying symptomology and experience. But I want people to just kind of know that there's this range of what traumatic experiences could be. You did such a beautiful job of naming that it can be different for different people, and that our logical mind really doesn't get to be the boss of whether we experience something as traumatic or not. It's just
Yeah.
outside of the logical mind. It's in the emotional brain, and it's in the nervous system. And I think that's an important distinction for people that might over intellectualize things or want to.
Blame themselves, say, oh, there's something wrong with me. Like, and people don't get that people who survive the same event, like for instance, my husband and daughter survived the second fire, and that I reacted more to it than they did. And it's like they think just because you've been through the same event that you're all going to have the same triggers, the same symptoms afterwards. But we've all got different histories, we've got different biology. And even, I mean, one of the psychiatrists in the field, Bessel van der Kolk, said that he's interviewed people who survived the same major event and their recollection and memory of it was completely different.
Yeah.
And because our minds can never be completely objective too, we know that from yogic psychology, and we're slightly warped with our own perception of things. But yeah, we can't always control, often can't control how the effect of things is going to be afterwards.
For
And often I
sure.
think people blame themselves and say, I should be over this by now. So and so is.
Mm. Or even like people close to you, they're just hardwired to want us to be okay, right? Like even the most
Mm,
sensitive and compassionate partner, for example, they're going to want you to be okay at a certain point, just because their sense of security in the world can be tied up with your okayness, right? And so I think that in this range of like healing from trauma, having support outside of your family unit, having support that reminds you that you don't have to logically understand it or that you didn't do anything wrong, and that this is a journey that you get to work through. I always tell people that I get really excited when they tell me they want to work through some trauma or heal some old wounds, because I know the freedom and the beauty waiting on the other side of that, and the like, the joy they're going to have access to. And so I just kind of want to paint that picture for our listeners right from the start.
yeah, and I think it's great. There's so much more research now with trauma being held in the body, and that talk therapy and medication is often not enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And particularly that word held. And I know you may not mean that in the literal sense, but I just want to clarify for people that it's not held in like your shoulder or your hip. It's really like in the fascia and in the nervous
Mm,
system. And it's like, sometimes I think there was this trend in the trauma recovery space and the somatic space of like, oh, you just
yeah.
need to release it from this part of your body. And that's just not
Like your
how.
hips, your psoas.
Right. But like it's more
Yeah.
of a tending to these parts that happens, rather than like we're not going to like clear a chakra and all the trauma will be gone. That's a
Mm.
myth as well. We're more learning to tend and return and be with these parts of us and help them get their needs met over and over. That
And
softens.
not just release the psoas and think that's all you need to do. Yeah,
Yeah.
because that's what I initially thought, that it was mainly the psoas. And the psoas is an important muscle because of the location, with it
Mhm.
starting in the spine and then wrapping around into the groin pretty much and
Yeah.
blocking our primary respiratory muscle of the diaphragm. So it is definitely involved.
Mm-hmm.
And but back in the day, I did trauma release exercises, TRE, with the David Bocelli ones. They fatigue the psoas and then they release it.
Mm-hmm.
But after the fire, it was very interesting with the tremors I experienced that proved that it was all over my body with with what happened after with the somatic. The way my body was holding it was quite incredible.
Yeah.
And but unfortunately, we're taught that tremors and shaking is a weakness. Hold it together,
Mm,
like an armor. Yeah. But it's good for
right.
people to know it can be a good thing. Yeah.
Yeah. I tell people a lot, and I want to get a little more into your story in just a second, but that a
Sure.
lot of the ways that our body actually will naturally reduce the imprint of a traumatic experience is through tremoring or uncontrollable crying or very like animalistic body movement or even just being really, really still. And so these different ways that we heal from trauma, even in a yoga environment, don't always look like warrior two. They can look so much more fluid and so much more body led. And that can be quite uncomfortable for people to even let themselves tremor because you're working through those like thick layers of being told that, like, oh, that means I'm weak or I might draw
Mm.
attention to myself or whatever it is.
Yeah, so it can be hard to start the tremoring because you've been trained all those years to brace, especially, I'm going to be a bit sexist here, but especially for men
Mm,
who, th being the man of the house. I mean, even my uncle was told when his father died and he was 11, you can't grieve. You've got to hold it together. You're the man of the house. Stop crying.
mm,
So we naturally try to avoid the release. But luckily, because of my knowledge and experience with yoga and other therapy, I knew that it was a good thing, but I just didn't realize how much I would react. And I can explain that
mm-hmm.
as well, if you would
Yeah. So
like.
let's do that. Let's get into what brought you to
I
yoga.
might have veered off there too early. Sorry about that, Kerry,
No,
but
no, it's
no,
good. Let's go with
it
it.
just made me think. Um, so after the fire, obviously my nervous system was really wired.
This is the
And
first fire or the second
the
fire?
second fire was
Okay.
worse. Yeah.
Mhm.
Um, because I was what Dr. Dan Siegel describes as really hyper vigilant,
Mhm.
anxious, on the verge of a panic attack, that sort of thing at night time because the fire happened at night. And then I was sort of more hypo vigilant, the opposite during the day. But what was really interesting was even for those people who think, especially for those people even who just think it's in the psoas, as we were saying, I would be in doing a yin pose of the yin version of cobra,
Mhm.
sphinx.
Yeah.
And my head, and for those who are watching on YouTube, my head was, oh, I've just knocked the mic, but that's okay. My head was going up and down, or I was swaying side to side, and I just went with it. I
Mhm.
knew, and I just thought, well, that's interesting. That's never happened in Sphinx before. And my husband saw me because once it was in bed, I often stretch. I'll often do that at night to help me sleep. But he was like,
Yeah.
what the hell is wrong with you? And I'm like, this is normal.
Mhm.
And even my diaphragm would spasm because I noticed after this second fire, there was a lot more tension
Mm.
through my diaphragm, solar plexus, even my pectorals, upper trap. So it was all over, but this diaphragm would spasm. I've never had that before.
Mhm.
And I do a lot of myofascial release because of the training I've done here in Australia. and also in the United States. Oh, actually, no, I didn't. What am I saying? They're based in the United States, and I did it online.
Mm-hmm.
That I'm getting my training mixed up. Doesn't matter though. I do a lot of myofascial release,
Yeah.
and when I would go to release my temporalis in the side of my head, my masseters, the chewing muscles, down the back of my neck, the side of the neck, to put it in layman's term, I would tremor. And it was affecting the vagus nerve too, and it would help me go to sleep. But I thought that's never happened before. And I had more pain as well because of the way my body had tightened up. There was more tension, had more of a sympathetic nervous posture.
Mm.
So it just proves it's not just the psoas, it's
Yeah.
all over.
And so how did that lead you to becoming a yoga therapist or really exploring trauma-informed yoga?
I'd started exploring trauma-informed yoga and yoga for mental health
Mm-hmm.
back in 2013 was my introduction. So I'd done my 500 hours because I did the first 200 in 2012. And then I happened to do a remedial yoga course, which was initially called yoga therapy, but in Australia, they're quite strict on that word. And they were told, no, you can't call it that. Anyway, and in this course, I learned about yoga specifically for mental health from a yoga therapist and psychologist who came in, and she told me about Amy Weintraub, who's in the United States, and
Yeah.
she wrote one of the first articles in the Yoga Journal about yoga for
She
depression,
also wrote
yoga
Yoga for Depression, the book. It's a great
and that
read.
too, yeah. And then yoga skills for therapists and yoga for your mood deck and all that. But she also wrote the first article about equating yoga to Prozac. Anyway, I
Mm.
learned about that style of yoga. And then she actually happened, and so that got me down the route of looking into more specifics, but I wasn't a yoga therapist.
Yeah.
In Australia, you've pretty much got to be teaching for 10 years to become one. It's yeah, anyway. And then she came to the Australia, which was amazing. So of course I took that opportunity because it's yeah, and then I became certified level one, and I did some other training because we are lucky also to have Dr. Timothy McCall, famous yoga therapist, author of Yoga is Medicine,
Yeah.
come. And then before the fire, I did another course on it was a yoga therapy module of the whole yoga therapy on mental health.
Mm-hmm.
And then before the fire, I decided to sign up and do the whole yoga therapy qualification, which is here in Australia, it's 650 hours minimum, and it has to be done over a 2 year period.
Yeah.
And my husband, after the fire, was like, "Why did you sign up for this?" I said, "I did it before the fire, and I think it was meant to be." And I learned more about there were trauma specific subjects as well. And Amy does touch on it with her training and the different approaches. But because
Yeah.
of my own experience of having complex PTSD, it's I think it's also because if you suffer from it yourself, you get more of a passion for it.
Yeah.
That's how I feel too. Yeah.
So
Mm.
it sounds like you obviously you experienced some childhood trauma. You and then at some point you experienced a fire and then you were working as a yoga professional during that time. You were really processing different levels of like different styles that you were working on earlier and then uncoupling from some of that and learning some different areas and then you experienced a second fire and that was a huge traumatic event for you that had massive ramifications and then that kind of pushed you even further into an interest in this arena but also I think it's a cool story to name and I feel like I have this perspective too of having experienced trauma prior to yoga being in your life. Maybe I'm not picking up on that. Maybe you've done yoga your whole life. And
No,
then
I definitely did. Mm.
so like trauma happened before yoga happened,
Mm.
and then
Yeah.
yoga was there, and then traumatic events happened during yoga practice. and then just kind of just seeing that evolution. So I'm curious for you what yoga has given you in that trauma recovery journey, like yoga in particular, because obviously yoga is not the only tool in the tool belt here. Mental health support is immensely important, and working with a really great licensed clinician who is a mental health provider, I'm sure was a massive part of your journey too. But what about specifically yoga?
Yes, that's a good question because in the old days, it was just talk therapy or play therapy with kids because I was diagnosed at age 11
Mm-hmm.
because of sexual abuse and ongoing abuse at an international school I went to. And it never got rid of the nightmares that I had. And it was still in my body a lot. So when I discovered yoga, it was another way of working from what we call as a bottom up approach because they now know after a lot of research that because trauma's stored in the body, we need both a top down, working at the brain first into the body, like talk therapy, and we need a bottom up approach of working in the body first. So EMDR I've had as well, which is both. But yoga was a way of me helping to get it out of the body to the surface and release things. And also not rely on a therapist all the time, reduce medication. But it was mainly a way of a bottom up approach. But not all yoga is a bottom up approach. A lot
Mm-hmm.
of it is just very depends. And I think it's important for listeners to know
Yeah.
that yoga can be a top down approach, especially the way it's taught in classes these days. But it was a way to get it out of the body, but it was also a way of helping the nervous system regulate because not more so from the poses, except the poses can release the diaphragm, but more so with pranayama, with breath work.
Mm-hmm.
That's another thing that yoga can do if you know what breath work's going to help you, because it's also important for listeners to know that some breath work can actually be more harmful than helpful when you're dealing with any contraindication,
Yeah.
really, like high blood pressure or whatever, asthma, but also with trauma, because it could be too stimulating for the central nervous system
Mm-hmm.
and not be a good thing. But it can also be a very useful thing for the nervous system and a quick way to hack it, but to improve it over a period of time so it's more regulated and it operates more like a well-serviced sports car
Mm.
to a broken down car that doesn't have good brakes and stuff like that. So it's helped in that way, but it's also helped with what a lot of people don't realize is the self-study that yoga involves. It's really mind training. It's a mind tool, and you get to become more aware of the thoughts that
And
are coming up
emotion. Yeah.
and the emotions and notice what's coming up so you can start to learn which things are serving you and which isn't. And
Mm.
also, the other thing yoga gave me was help with addiction. So, having PTSD and ADHD, double whammy, it makes me more of an addictive, more susceptible to addiction. And I took up smoking when I was 14 or 15. And I was trying to quit on and off for years. And being someone who was sexually abused, I was also very conscious of my weight and was anorexic from the age of, well, borderline from the 11, 13. So smoking was great because I was like, yes, it's curbing my appetite.
Appetite
I was,
suppressant. Yeah.
and it was cool and it stopped being bullied at school. But then it's incredibly addictive, as we all know. And I struggled to quit. I did everything. And I even did hypnosis. And then I got to the age of, I discovered yoga. And within 3 months, I quit the smoking. even though I was still
Mhm.
in a miserable job because I had another stress coping mechanism rather than smoking and drinking alcohol. So that's what it's done for me.
I just want to pause and just sit with that for a moment because what an incredible gift, Liz. I mean, it gave you many different benefits across many different areas of you. I know it also gave you spiritual benefits that you didn't name, but I want to name for our listeners. There were clearly spiritual benefits that came from this too. And it just radically improved your life on so many different levels. And
Like Ishvari Pranadana, actually.
yeah,
That's one of the things that also comes to mind.
right.
Realizing that things can happen for a reason and the divine can often have a plan for us.
Right. And to not, I feel like one of the things that I really work with a lot of my clients around is capacity to trust because
The
trauma will
process.
really shake you. Well, even, trust self, trust
Yeah.
God or goddess or universe or source, whatever you want to call it, trust other people, trust money, trust health, whatever it is. But I think Ishwara Pranidhana really invites us to practice that trust alone. So, one of the things that we haven't gotten into yet, but I think is really important to name, particularly because in my area, there's a lot of power yoga. Power yoga here in the States is still quite trendy. And
Yeah,
I
it
don't know
is.
if it's really popular where you are too.
Uh, it's not as trendy as it was, but that's more post-COVID. Like we
Mm-hmm.
had, where I'm in a small city of 500,000 people, we used to have three power yoga studios here. It was the
Yeah.
first vinyasa studio, and it's there's none now, but that's also closing down
Yeah. COVID
because they
changed this
closed down,
industry so much. Yeah.
and the hot. I think it's also the heat is not an as exciting and trendy.
Yes. I do feel like we're seeing power yoga become less trendy, but it is still such a major movement. And I know for some women, power yoga is an important doorway into yoga because it is stimulating enough. You're not being still in a way that might trigger you. There's a lot of like moving that happens in power yoga and it's strong. And for some people who've experienced trauma, that is a really important stepping stone into a yoga practice. And also true, it is not necessarily the most beneficial style of yoga to support long-term trauma recovery, to support the nervous system resiliency, to support the deeper aspects of a yoga practice, like the mind and the body and the spirit and the integration of life and the philosophical aspects. Like we kind of miss out on those. But then also styles like Bikram, where there's been a whole lot of cult dynamics and
Oh,
abuse that
terrible.
exist in that style. And if you don't know Bikram yoga, it's the signature 26 poses done in rooms that are heated to around 110
Mm,
degrees Fahrenheit, and it's very, very structured. And so I know
very
you can
top down,
very top down.
dogmatic.
Yes, your agency in the class, like
No, no.
agency in your capacity to choose for yourself and honor your body is very low. Like you're following in a prescribed, structured set of alignment. And I feel like, 20 years ago in the yoga industry, those styles of yoga that offered people very little choice were really appealing to a lot of people.
Mm.
Like Iyengar yoga, I've studied with heavily in the Iyengar arena.
Oh, yes, strict too.
It's very strict as well.
Mm.
And you're kind of
Lots of
told,
dogma.
yeah, you're told like this is the right way to do something. And even if it doesn't
Mm.
feel good in your body, there has been time in a Iyengar class with a lovely woman, but she would put me in a shape, like her version of a down dog, for example. And then I would adjust my body in a way that felt better. And then she would come back over and do it again. And then I would adjust and she would just over and over. And then she one time was kind of stern with me and like, this. Um,
Yeah.
and so I kind of want to name because our listeners are all over the map in terms of where did they start with yoga? Where are they now? What are they exploring in their yoga practice now? And I feel like you were in the Bikram world, you were in the power yoga world, and Mike can speak to that a little bit about
Yeah, I
how
would
that
like to speak.
informs.
Yeah, sorry, I would like to speak to that. The main thing is there's lack of choice. With yeah, so Bikram was very strict. We weren't allowed to leave the room. You're only allowed to drink at certain times. You were allowed to, go into Shavasana if lie on your back if you needed a break. But as I know now with arthritis, lying on your back without props for me doesn't feel good either. There's a lot
Mhm.
of ignorance and there's a lot of top down cues. Your feet need to be hip width apart. It's not about what you're feeling in the body, it's about physical alignment, which is very common.
Mhm.
With power yoga, though, what I did like about it versus Ashtanga. So, Ashtanga is like Bikram in that it's a set sequence. There's
Mhm.
all three sequences, though, and you've got to get approval to move up. With Ashtanga, I found it very like Bikram in that they just said warrior two, blah, blah, blah. There was no spirituality to it, and there was not much choice as well, and it's very overwhelming because there's some really strong poses in Ashtanga.
There are, yeah.
Uh, yeah, but with power yoga, the way it's taught here in Australia, it's we have Duncan Peake here, and I actually studied with him. I did a second 200-hour training
Mhm.
in with power living. What I do like about power yoga that it has over Bikram and Iyengar and Ashtanga is they're not as strict on the alignment, for one. It's
Mhm.
not, your foot has to be 90 degrees. It's got to be 30 centimeters. In Warrior One, you've got to be 1 foot distance. It's like they're almost going to get a measuring tape on you. Uh, but anyway, with power yoga, they're not as strict with the alignment. But here, the way it's taught here, which really I loved, was they bring a lot of philosophy with the way they theme classes towards ahimsa or presence. And
Mhm.
there's more self inquiry in that they'll give you a story about their experience and then ask you questions that make you think, contemplate. So you get it, it's a bit of yogic psychology in the class. And I
Mhm.
think that can be beneficial. And
Yeah.
also, we were allowed to leave the studio and go to the bathroom or whatever.
And
But,
drink water if you need to. Yeah.
yeah. So it did have the yogic psychology with the cueing. So there was but it still was top down cueing, but still they explained the spirituality. They emphasized the fact that the most experienced yogi in the room doesn't necessarily do handstand. And so they gave,
Mhm.
they sort of educated students to know the real yoga and that you don't have to do that. Whereas
Yeah.
I actually went to an advanced Bikram class in Queensland a while ago, and they literally taught it like a gymnastics class in that they cheered people on. They
Mhm.
glorified flexibility like I've never seen. And they would compare students
Yeah. There's
in Bikram.
shaming. Mhm.
Yeah, exactly. But they actually cheered for people like it was a competition.
Yeah.
But that is very true of Bikram because they used to have a competition in the US.
Yeah.
Some and they do glorify flexibility a lot. And even when students warm up, they face away from the wall. They put their hands above their head and they try to walk down the wall, which
Yeah.
can be extremely dangerous. And they push students too much. I literally had my head yanked back with
Mhm.
like grabbed my ponytail, didn't know where he was, gave me the fright of my life.
Yeah.
I got pushed in a forward fold and ended up with sciatica and limping out of the room. So they also push students and don't let
Yeah.
them to practice ahimsa. Yeah.
Yeah. So I want to kind of frame this up for our listeners because I think there are several different points that you touched on that could be red flags for people.
Yeah.
that are things that you would want to try to avoid in a yoga practice. And I want to also acknowledge that a lot of modern yoga practitioners are doing a lot of their practice online. And so there's
Yep.
not that context or nuance of, unless a teacher is skillful at communicating the context and the nuance within the structure of an online class, what a teacher is saying is not like um, the only way to approach a pose or the only way to think about a pose, or it's not like the Bible. You don't have to like follow it like a textbook all the way through. And so obviously you want to be in a class environment where you're going to be listened to, you can take care of your body in a very basic human way. You can drink water, you can go to the bathroom, but also you're having the power to choose. I know that you've shared that you view yoga like penicillin and that it's helpful to some and toxic to others. So, do you want to speak to that a little bit here? Because I think it's just so important in the trauma informed yoga space that we actually know when we're in an environment that is supportive and when we're in an environment that might be inflammatory.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so my teacher, Joe Fee, used to say yoga poses are like penicillin. One may be medicine to you and might be poison to your neighbor. But I like to take it further that it's not just yoga poses, it's yoga practices in
Mm-hmm.
like breath work and meditation, especially people with trauma. There's forms of meditation that can be quite contraindicative, like silent retreats for one,
Mm-hmm.
um, visualization of going back to your inner child. There was a yoga teacher who was sued for that actually successfully. So that's what I mean by that. And that's why it's good for a teacher to give options and also giving a student an opt out. If this is triggering you,
Yeah.
stop. If this doesn't feel good on your body, maybe if child's pose with your legs together, your knees together doesn't feel good, would you like to bring them apart? If your hands out in front of you hurts your shoulders, you want to bring them by your side. But also for a yoga teacher to even understand that child's pose doesn't suit everyone. And in the trauma lens, there have been earthquake victims. Because you know how they often say in a yoga class, oh, go to child's pose. It's nurturing, blah, blah, blah.
Mm-hmm.
There've been earthquake victims who have gotten triggered from child's pose because it reminded them of having to go low to the ground to brace and protect themselves.
Yeah.
So I think it's important to give students an even, it's nice if a yoga teacher can give you another pose. But also the other things that can be nice is knowing, for a lot of us, knowing where the emergency exits are. I don't think that's much to ask. So you can get a great gauge of a studio by when you go in to see how they welcome you. Do
Mm-hmm.
they say, oh, by the way, here's emergency exits, here's the bathroom, so you familiar with the studio. They have a nice warm face. They're approachable, they smile. They don't just say, you're late, put your shoes over there and treat you like a school kid.
Mm-hmm.
That can be important too.
Yeah.
But yeah, and sometimes it can be nice to bring a friend too,
If you
a
can.
support person
Absolutely.
if you can, or even have a friend or your therapist call the yoga studio to get a bit of a gauge,
Mm-hmm.
because even people who've brought their therapist here in Australia, um, they're going that a therapist and this is not like a yoga therapist, this is a trauma therapist, have taken their clients into a yoga class and they've said to the teacher, look, this person's got sexual abuse. Don't they don't want a happy baby is going to be an issue. Don't touch them, blah, blah, blah. And given them, and the teachers rolled their eyes and thought, oh, well, all yoga's trauma informed. It's all therapeutic. It's good for everyone. And
Mm-hmm.
that's ignorance. That's dogma.
Yeah.
So they're the things that can be red flags with with things like no choice, not being, and just teachers being approachable. Like, I mean, after being surviving a second fire, I'm funny with smoke alarms now. So, for instance, I went to the gym and I said to them, "You don't have many smoke alarms here, and that one, I can't see the light. Have you tested it recently?" And I told them why, and they just laughed at me and went, "Oh, come on, it's not going to happen again to you." I'm like, "Well, I've survived two fires." So
Yeah,
you wouldn't want to go to a studio where they weren't compassionate,
right. They don't
you know,
value. Yeah.
and they don't listen.
Yes. So I
Mm,
hear a lot of really noticing how something makes you feel and then looking for spaces that are very relational, like they're helping you to feel comfortable from start to finish. I also want to say that I think that there's a lot of people who kind of hang a shingle and say that they're trauma informed, but they haven't actually taken appropriate training. And so
mm,
just using a sense of discernment about whether how someone makes you feel or how specific poses make you feel. Because for some women who have experienced sexual abuse, happy baby is not an issue. And then for other women, it
mm,
is an issue. And I think a lot of it is environment specific and it's individual, like we were talking about earlier. And so I think that the reality is that you don't know, like you said earlier, you don't know what's going to trigger you. And so
mm,
can you practice in an environment at home or online that actually allows you to meet your needs if you do become triggered? And maybe that's adapting or moving, maybe that's leaving the room, maybe that's, doing something completely different than the class is doing. I think I
if you're
think
allowed to.
yes, don't be in an
Mm,
environment where you're not allowed to, would be I would just recommend that across the board for anybody that's in
mm.
a trauma recovery journey to only engage in spaces where you can be supported and having choice. But also for somebody that's practicing online, just look into somebody's credentials before you
Yes.
go into like a deep meditation with them. I want you all to be scientists of kind of if you do a practice and you're told like, oh, it should have these benefits or it should feel this certain way, if it makes you feel awful, take note and don't assume it's something wrong with you that you feel
No,
awful,
exactly.
right? Or it could be
We're all
something with
different.
that teacher, yeah, or it could be something with that practice or that pose. um, so just really trusting that inner sense. Another thing that I wanted to name here is the lack of rest in a lot of yoga environments that I think is really a disservice to somebody that wants to recover from trauma and heal their nervous system and use an approach that isn't just all top down. I think restorative yoga, I think restful time, like a lengthy shavasana, are all such important pieces as well. That ability to down regulate the nervous system is essential.
I agree, although I would like to add that restorative yoga isn't always relaxing. So, Amy emphasizes this with meeting the mood. So, I mean, someone with trauma, like they're hyper vigilant, their nervous systems, wire, they're in that sympathetic state. They might need to get rid of some energy first
Yeah.
before going to a restorative class because they hold poses for so long
Hmm.
that there is for some people they need to get rid of some energy first,
Yeah.
or maybe only do it on a certain day where they feel they can go in stillness, and also know that and have hopefully have a teacher that knows that straps don't always go down well, especially if the straps are tied up.
Hmm.
Even not even even for not even for someone just with a sexual abuse history, like someone like me who's had to escape their house quickly, evacuate, might be going, "Oh my God, I'm stuck in this pose. She's tied me up with like in restorative bridge. She's got two belts around me. I can't get out of the pose myself. What if there's a fire? She's got 30 students to get out of this or whatever."
Yeah.
That could create panic. But yeah, I do believe stillness is important too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely. But I just wanted to add that in if anyone's felt like it's too much stillness or they've gone to a restorative class and couldn't relax.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, so I've been teaching restorative yoga for 17 years, and I've
Mm,
seen that so many times where somebody will be like in the most blissful state and they're asleep, and another person is very anxious. And I've been
mm,
telling people, like, you need to go on a run today if you want to come to restorative yoga. Like, you got to get that energy out if your nervous system does not transition well. Or, like, a lot of times we'll move first and then we'll do it. So it's
mm.
there, there are ways to, I think that sometimes people will become avoidant of rest and stillness because it makes you uncomfortable. But
Yes.
rest and stillness is an essential way that we actually access inner knowing, and that we experience passive muscle relaxation that we can't get
Yes.
in any other form of yoga. So
Yes.
I don't want to name restorative yoga as like bad or triggering, but it's more
It's
just like,
just different.
what are the needs in order to be able to get there in a way that works for you? Because I think it's just so important as a
Yeah,
therapy
it
as a
is
whole.
important, especially because people with trauma often have a sympathetic nervous system posture in that they've got a lot of muscle tension. But I thought I was doing well after the fire because I was busy. I was salvaging contents because we didn't lose everything. We were lucky. And
Mm-hmm.
I was really busy doing stuff. And then my therapist pointed out to me, you know, that's a trauma response because you're not ready to sit with the feelings
Mm-hmm.
and practice that self-study. It's too uncomfortable for you.
Mm-hmm.
So that's interesting too. And just anyone who's listening know that that's quite normal as well. Yeah.
It is. And it's normal to like to get to that at your own pace and in
Yeah,
your own time. And there's no right time for somebody else. It's the right time for you.
exactly.
And sometimes stillness practices in yoga can give us a way of sitting in stillness, but not sitting in the trauma, if that makes sense. Like, we learn how to be
Mm,
still with ourselves while doing a breath work that's soothing to the nervous system, not
true,
activating. And then
true.
that enables us to make friends with stillness. And then from that place of friendliness with stillness, we can then journal perhaps about
Oh, yeah,
experience.
yeah.
Like, these are, I want people to see in my own nerdy way, like how practical all this stuff is,
Mm,
because I think sometimes people that don't understand think that yoga is just like this this special thing that you do. But to me, this is like very basic practical work that we're doing on so many different levels. So I want to talk a little bit about women who are doing home practice more and how they can use trauma informed yoga to support them, but in a way that helps a woman who's doing it at home and not a studio. What
yeah,
tips
sure.
would you have for that woman?
Well, I mean, some people have gone to YouTube, which
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of like, there's no way to get feedback. And if you're going down that route, the only thing I would say, if you have to go down that route, look for something labeled trauma sensitive, not just trauma informed, trauma sensitive, because the trauma sensitive is taking it to the next level of a style of yoga that's particularly designed for people with PTSD. But at home, I think it's great to work with someone one on one to help design a home practice that you know is supportive and know the options you are and you have. And there's some practices I think that, especially in the acute phase, need to be avoided, like these fast-paced, huffy puffy breath works that you see on even Instagram and that actually can do a lot of damage. Not
Mm-hmm.
to scare people, I'd encourage people, invite them to avoid that.
Yeah.
And I would invite them really to work with someone one on one, or if you do it online, I would invite them to again research the teacher and look for something that's trauma sensitive or trauma informed, labeled that,
Yeah.
and the description as well. But it can be really good to work with someone one on one, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because we're all so different.
Yeah.
And if it's one on one, I think it's best to work with a yoga therapist. I know here in Australia, they're pretty strict with that.
Mm.
And if it's therapeutic yoga, it should be a yoga therapist. And I mean, I've gotten brought up on it social media a few years back when I used the word therapeutic because I wasn't a yoga therapist at the point. But yoga therapists are working with particular specific populations to
Yeah.
to for a therapeutic yoga practice, which I think for trauma release, it needs to be therapeutic
Mm-hmm.
in a way.
Well, and I
Yeah.
also just hate that term trauma release personally because
Oh, yeah, fair enough.
we're not
Yeah, fair
releasing
enough.
trauma. We're tending to ourselves in a way that holistically allows us to return to ourselves. We're not, I mean, my husband's therapist, we're big on mental health support in our house,
Fair enough.
describes trauma as like a knot in a tree. And the
A
knot
knot in a tree. A
a knot
knot.
in a tree. Yeah,
All right.
like a indentation and or not necessarily an indentation, but like a protrusion in a tree, like a unique part of a tree. And
Right.
how the knot will always be there, but the knot doesn't always have to bother you. Like it's just going to
Right.
be like a beautiful part of the tree versus like something that really troubles you. And so I just want to speak to that home practitioner as well about having a guide, which you so clearly, shared, like getting a good quality guide is really important, whether that's through a YouTube video or a membership like mine or working one to one with somebody like you or like me. But then also knowing that the real aim is this self tending work. That's the magic.
And
And that
yeah,
yoga practices that are actually therapeutic are going to feel a certain way. So, can we talk a little bit about what she'll actually feel if she's doing a kind of yoga that's going to really meet her needs?
feel well, the first thing I'd say would you would feel I would hope you would feel better at the end of the session than you would at the start. That the yoga would meet you where you are, meet your mood, whether it's anxious, uptight, needs to get rid of energy, or if you're feeling the opposite, meet you slowly,
Mm,
like with yoga nidra, and slowly elevate the mood back to a balanced state.
yeah.
Yeah, but meeting you where you are and focusing on what you feel rather than what it looks like
Mm-hmm.
and being individualized because we're so unique as
Yeah.
well.
So that better than when you started the practice.
And that if you
Mhm.
got triggered, no, I'd hope the yoga therapist or yoga teacher, if it's a trauma informed class, would know how to ground you.
Mm-hmm.
Because getting triggered is common enough. Cannot guarantee we're not going to trigger someone,
Yeah.
but we don't want to re-traumatize someone. We want to be able to offer a sacred space that people feel comfortable to be themselves. Like if they cry, that's
Mm-hmm.
okay. It's a release, but have someone there to ground them if
Yeah.
they do get triggered and need that and can't regulate themselves.
Mm-hmm. So this
Because not,
woman is going to
yeah,
feel physically and mentally better from the practice. She's going to feel
mm,
supported even if she gets emotional or has a triggered response, because the reality is
mm,
like we're not, I tell my clients that I will trigger them because it's inevitable that I won't trigger them. It would be impossible
yeah,
for me not to trigger someone. because
Mm.
I can't know everything. You can't know everything. So we're not trying to avoid triggers, but we are trying to, you do want to feel supported if you do become triggered,
Mm.
and not judged or shamed if that comes up, or not made to feel like there's something wrong. You want to feel like it's okay
It's
for you.
normal.
Yeah, it's
Mm.
normal. Absolutely.
Yeah, because some teachers will freak out who don't have that trauma informed. Like, if someone cries in the class, crying
Mhm.
is really normal in yoga. It's a release. In
Yeah.
Ayurveda, they use onions to encourage crying as a release, you know. But it is
Yeah.
normal, and just because a student cries doesn't mean you need to rescue them. It just depends. They
Right.
might just be crying lightly because they've had a gentle release. They're grieving. I know a
Mm-hmm.
yoga teacher here who'd lost her father. She
Mm.
spent the majority of class in child's pose crying quietly. And the
Yeah.
teacher knew she's okay. That's what she needs today.
Mm-hmm.
There's, she didn't. Whereas I've heard of yoga teachers freaking out and you're disturbing the class. Can you just stop crying? And can you get some therapy before you come back to another class? You
Mm-hmm.
know,
I think those are a lot less common for our listeners that might be avoiding taking a class.
no, no, look, no, that's pretty. She
Or
was a new teacher. I'm not trying to scare people, but I'm just saying
yeah,
this is what a supportive space would be that
would look like. Yeah.
you would expect to trigger someone because you know that what triggers one person may not necessarily trigger another. Like sirens might trigger someone like me, but
Mm-hmm.
not someone like you. I don't know, but we
Sure.
would be prepared for it to support and offer that sacred container. And yeah, this was a new teacher who
For sure.
also had some trauma herself.
Yeah,
Um,
not everybody
yeah,
can hold our depths with us, and finding people that are, as Brene Brown calls it, like not that you would share deeply this stuff, but like people that are safe for you to explore deep things around. The vault, Brene Brown calls it.
I'm
So
not so familiar with her, but yes, she's someone who's on my list to look more into. Yeah.
incredible work there. And if anybody listening is not familiar with her, she's based here in the States, and she is a researcher on humans and the human psyche. She's a shame expert, and she's just got
Oh,
so much to say about imperfection and shame and the courage to be you in the world, vulnerability, authenticity. She's amazing. Highly recommend. So,
yeah. I
Liz,
watched one speech on YouTube and it was powerful and
oh,
inspiring. Yeah,
I,
that's
I,
about all I've seen.
her books are really great as well. So, Liz, we have covered so much
Us,
ground together. We've
yeah.
talked about all kinds of things. As a closing question, I'd love to ask, and we've just like danced all over this so many times, but if there's anything else that you have to share about how yoga has been or is currently a part of your growth and healing journey, how is yoga supporting you in your own growth and healing?
Through greater self-inquiry at the moment, like through yogic psychology, but I just want to emphasize to listeners that it doesn't have to involve rolling out a yoga mat.
Mm,
And I think what's been great for me with having my own practice and knowing that is I can break it up throughout the day as little pieces of yoga snacks and self-care. Yeah, that sort of thing. Like if I'm feeling frazzled, I can stop and do my breathe breath. I
hmm.
can do my meditation, then journal and see what's come out of that self-inquiry. I can break it up.
Yeah.
Um, and I never used to have that. So that can be great. How about having a home practice? Yeah, it can be more
Yeah.
portable, time efficient, and tailored to yourself.
Hmm.
Yeah. Mm.
I love that. It sounds like you found a way to really have it work for your life, and for you to have these beautiful tools in the tool belt that you can grab and use, that on so many different levels has been healing for you and empowering for you to just continue to be nourished by.
It fits into my life now, where that used to be I had to fit my life around going to a class. So that's great.
Yes. I feel
Mm.
like motherhood really changed that for me to the point that the Nourished Woman Sanctuary, my membership, is all 15 to 30-minute practices because truly, like if we look at the science, 18 minutes is like the point of massive difference for a lot of people's nervous systems. And so
Mm.
just know that like like you're saying, little doses of yoga medicine, if you will, therapeutic yoga can make a world of difference in how you feel and how your nervous system is responding and how your brain is responding to what's presenting itself in your life.
Especially because of the neuroplasticity of the brain. Dr. Timothy McCall emphasized that that can be more effective because of
Yeah.
it's so consistent and regular than going to a couple of yoga classes a week. Yeah.
For sure. So,
Mm.
if people want to look into you, I know you've got a podcast that they can look into. Is it available in all the places or is it more like one pocket of where they go to find it?
No, it's available everywhere except on YouTube. There's not all of the episodes are out
Okay,
there for various reasons because not all of them recorded video, for instance, but it's
sure.
available anywhere else. Yeah.
Great. And where would
And
they find you on the internet?
Liz Albanis, which they'll see how to spell wellness.com.au and Liz Albanis Wellness AU on YouTube and Instagram pretty much. And I've got a wellness designed for you program which I incorporate because I've got fitness qualifications and my fascial release Pilates, where I tailor a program to them that incorporates yoga therapy with my fascial release and fitness if that's appropriate online.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the main things I do anyway. And before I actually offer it face to face here in Canberra, at the moment it's just online.
Yeah,
Yeah.
excellent.
Mm.
Well, I will put all the information down in the show notes. So if you want to look more into Liz, you can see more about who she is and what she does. Liz, it's been such a treat to get to meet you, and it's been fun to I've had a couple of international guests on. You're my second one. It's been fun to
Oh,
just hear about the yoga world where you live as well. So thanks for your time today.
thanks for having me, Carrie. It's been a really interesting conversation.